You want to remember that for the Russians, they believe they're facing an existential threat. And when you think you're facing an existential threat, you in effect fight to the death. And the West is furthermore deeply committed to this war. So it's hard to see the West quitting, especially since Western soldiers are not involved. If anybody is going to get battle weary and think about quitting, it's not the West, it's the Ukrainians. And the Ukrainians, of course, view what's happening as an existential threat themselves. So the Ukrainians have a deep-seated interest in fighting to the death. So when you look carefully at this, it's very hard to see how it comes to an end unless the Russians begin to score major victories on the battlefield and the Ukrainian military collapses, or unless the Ukrainians begin to win on the battlefield and the Russians use nuclear weapons, in which case both sides would go to great lengths to shut the war down very quickly. But neither one of those two scenarios that lead to an end to the war look likely at this point in time. And what appears to be likely is that you're going to have a protracted war. One very important element in the equation is whether or not you get a meaningful peace to end this conflict at some point in the not too distant future. I think it's more likely that you'll end up with a frozen conflict than with a meaningful peace treaty. So I think this conflict could lead to a situation where both sides stop shooting at each other, but the situation is not peaceful at all. And in fact, it looks a lot like the Cold Peace between North Korea and South Korea. And if that's the case, relations in Europe, stability in Europe, are going to be in terrible shape for the foreseeable future.